Who is Lenore, uncle? It was the evening of the same day. A day never to be forgotten by Stella. A day marked with a white stone in her mental calendar. Never would she be able to look upon a field of primroses. Never hear the music of river running over the weir. Without remembering this morning, the first she had spent with Lord Leicester. It was evening now, and the two, the painter and the girl, were sitting by the open window. Looking out in the gloaming, he lost in memory. She, going over and over again the incidents of this morning. From the visit of Mr. Jasper Addleston to his encounter with Lord Leicester. It was strange. It was almost phenomenal. For Stella was frankness and candor itself. That she had nothing of the encounter to her uncle. Once or twice she had opened her lips. Once at dinner. And once again she sat beside him, leaning her arm on his chair while he smoked his pipe. She had opened her lips to tell him that the sudden outburst of fury on the part of Lord Leicester, that passionate rage which proved all the painter has said about his hot temper to be true. But she had found some difficulty in the recital which had kept her silent. Yes, I've always had blue eyes. She had told him of her walks in the woods, had told him of her meeting with Lady Lillian, but of that passionate encounter between the two men she said nothing. When Jasper had ridden on, pale and livid with suppressed passion, Lord Leicester had stood looking at her in silence. Now, as she sat looking and gloaming, 1 second. Okay. She saw him in her mind's eye still, his beautiful eloquent remorse and humility, his clear-cut lips quivering with a sense of weakness. Oh no, I am not AI. I'm not AI. I'm anything but AI. Okay, let me see. Hi charmed original, I am not AI. I'm a real life person, just with a character. Okay, will you forgive me? He said. And that was all. Hello everyone. Hello. He said, at last, and that was all. Without another word, he had offered to help her into the boat. Helped which Stella has disregarded, and had rowed her across to her uncle. Without a word, but with the same penitent, imploring look in his eyes, he raised his hat and left her, had gone to the hall, to his sister Lady Lillian, and to Lenore. Hi everyone for joining the chat. Hello and welcome to my stream. Ever since she had heard the name drop softly from Lady Lillian's lips, it had rung in her ears. There was a subtle kind of charm about it that was half fascinated and half annoyed her. And now, leaning her head on her arm, and her dark eyes fixed on the stars which glittered merrily in the sky, she put a question. Who is Lenore, uncle? He stirred in his chair and looked at her absently. Hi everyone in this chat. Welcome to my stream. I'm reading a story. Lenore? Lenore? I don't know, Stella. And yet, The name sounds familiar. Where did you hear it? It's scarcely fair to spring a question like that on me. You might ask me who is Julia, Louisoire, Anna Maria. Stella laughed softly. I heard it this morning, Uncle. Lady Lillian told her brother as she left us for Lenore had come. Ah, yes, he said. Now I know. So she has come, has she? Who is Lenore? He said. And he smiled. There is scarcely another woman in England who need to ask that question, Stella. No? She said, turning her eyes upon him with surprise. Why? Is she famous? Exactly, yes. That is just the word. She is indeed famous. For what, Uncle? Is she a great actress? Painter? What about it? She's something that the world nowadays reckon far above any classes you have named, Stella. She is of great beauty. Oh, is that all, Uncle? Said Stella curtly. All? He echoed, amused. Yes, and she nodded. It seems so easy. So easy, he laughed. And then, so very easy if you happen to be born so. There is no merit in it. And is that all she is? He staggered by her sang-froid for a moment. Well, I was scarcely fair, perhaps. As you say, it is not easy to be great beauty. But if you are one, it is rather difficult if you are not. But Lenore has something more than that. She is an enchantress. Hi everyone that's been joining the chat. I'm reading a storybook. Just letting you know. Yeah, thank you guys so much for the follow. That's better, remarked Stella. For those of you who are currently watching, I'm thinking once I finish 3 chapters, maybe we can do a bit of horror reading tonight. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know in the chat. Okay. That's better, remarked Stella. I like that. And how does she enchant? Does she keep tame snakes and play music? Or mesmerize people? Or what? The painter laughed again, with great enjoyment at her naivety. You're quite a cynic, Stella. Where did you learn the trick? From your father? Or is it a natural gift? No, she does not keep tame snakes. No, and I do not know if she has acquired the art of mesmerism. But she can charm for all that. She's really, truly very beautiful. Tell me, Uncle, what is she like? Interrupted Stella, softly. The old man paused for a moment to light his pipe. She is very fair, he said. I know, said Stella dreamily and with a little smile. With a yellow hair and blue eyes and a pink and white complexion and blue veins and a tiny mouth. All wrong. How wrong, he said with a laugh. You have woman-like picture of a China doll. Lenore is unlike a China doll, and this is possible to imagine. She has golden hair, it is true, but golden hair and not yellow. There is a difference. Then, her eyes are not blue, they are violet. Violet? Violet, he repeated, gravely. I've seen them as violet as the flowers that grow on the bank of over there. Her mouth is not small. There was never yet a woman worth a fig who had a small mouth. It is rather large than otherwise. But then it is a mouth. Hey Tabby. Yeah, I will look. I'm trying, but thank you so much for the feedback. Expressive, said Stella quietly. Elegant, he corrected. That sort of mouth that can speak volumes with a curve of a lip. You think I exaggerate? Wait until you see her. I don't think, said Stella, and then slowly, that I'm particularly desirous of seeing her, uncle. It reminds me of what they say of Naples. See Naples and die. See Lenore and die. He laughed. Well, it is not altogether false. Many have seen her, many men actually, and been ready to die for her love. Stella laughed. She must think very beautiful to talk like this, uncle. She is charming too. Yes, she is charming, he said, with a charm that one is bound to admit at once. But what is she really like, uncle? Asked Stella, with a touch of feminine impatience. What does she not? He answered. There is scarcely an accomplishment under the sun or moon that has not seen at her command. In a word, Stella, Lenore is the outcome of higher civilization. She is the type of our latest requirement, which demands more than mere beauty, and will not be satisfied with mere cleverness. She writes beautifully and fearlessly. She plays and sings better than one half the women one hears at concerts. They tell me that no woman in London can dance with greater grace. And I've seen her land a salmon of 20 pounds with all the skill of a Scotch gilly. Oh, God. Do I have a routine to preserve my voice? You just need to make sure to take care of your voice. So a few quick pointers is like, don't drink so much cold water and try to enunciate as much as possible in your free time. So where was I? Okay, I'll go back to the story. Stella was silent a moment. You describe a paragon, uncle. How all her women friends must detest her. He laughed. I think you're wrong. I never knew a woman more popular. How proud her husband must be of her, murmured Stella. Her husband? What husband? She is not married. Stella laughed. Can I speak another language? Yes, I can, but English is my primary language. Not married? Such a perfection! Unmarried? Is it possible that mankind can permit such a paragon to remain single? Uncle, they must be afraid of her. Well, perhaps they are. Some of them. He assented, smiling. No, he continued. She's not married. Lenore might have been married long before this. She had so many chances, and some of the great ones. She might have been a duchess by this time if she had chosen. And why did she not? Said Stella. Such a woman should be nothing less than a duchess. It is a duchess whom you've described, uncle. I don't know, he said. I don't think anyone knows, really. Perhaps she does not know it herself. Stella was silent for a moment. Her imagination was hard at work. Is she rich or poor, uncle?
I don't know. Rich, I should think,
he answered.
And what of her other name? Or has she only one name, like a princess or a church dignitary? Her name is Beauchamp. Lady Lenore Beauchamp.
Lady, repeated Stella, unsurprised. She has a title then. It was all that was wanted.
Yes, she's the daughter of a peer.
What a woman she must be. Is she a woman or a girl though? I've imagined her a woman of 30. Oh my god, there's so many lines for these two characters. Voicing them is so tiring. There's a lot more dialogue this time. There's a lot more dialogue for characters this time rather than just a story. I feel like I'm voice acting more today. Okay, sorry. Pardon me for that. I just need to take my breath. Normally, when it comes to voice acting, you really need to study the lines, study the character. Then only you try to narrate the character's lines. But now I'm doing everything. I'm doing everything today, like single take. So just keep that in mind. It's going to be the first time I voice any of these lines, and it's the first time I've been reading the story. Okay, so where was I?
Lady Lenore is...
He thought for a moment.
Just 23.
Hi Sharon, welcome to the stream.
That's a woman,
said Stella.
And this wonderful creature is at the hall within sight of us. Tell me, uncle, do they keep her in a glass case and only permit her to be seen as a curiosity? If ought to do so, you know.
He laughed, and his hand stroked her hair.
What it is Voltaire says, Stella,
he remarked.
If you want a woman to hate another, praise her to be the first one.
Stella's face flushed hotly, and she laughed with just a touch of scorn.
Hate? I do not hate, uncle. I admire her. I should like to see her, to touch her, to feel for myself that such wonderful charm of which you speak. I should like to see how she bears it. It must be strange, you know, to be superior to all one's kind. If she feels strange, he said thoughtfully, she does not show it. I never saw a more perfect grace and ease than hers. I do not think anything in the world would ruffle her. I think if she was on board a ship that was going down inch by inch, and she knew that within, say, 5 minutes of death, she would not flinch or drop for a moment the smile which usually rests upon her lips. That is her charm, Stella, the perfect ease and perfect grace which sprung from a consciousness of her power.
There was a silence for a moment. The painter had spoken in his unusual dreamy fashion, more like communion with his own thoughts than a direct address to his hearers. And Stella, listening, allowed every word to sink into her mind. Hey Gwen, thank you so much. Hi, yeah, you like my eyes? Yeah, they're just blue eyes. Okay, where was I? Yeah, I'm reading a story. It's a fantasy romance story called A Girl's Love by Charles Garvice. Hey, thank you so much for the rose. Thank you. His description impressed her more than she cared to admit. Already, so it seems to her, she felt fascinated by this beautiful creature, who appeared as perfect and faultless as one of the hidden goddess, say Diana. "Where does she live?" she asked, dreamily. He smoked in silence for a moment.
"Live? I scarcely know. She's everywhere. In London, in the season, visiting in country houses at other times. There is not a house in England where she would not be received with warm welcome according to the princess. It is rather strange that she should be down here at all. The season has commenced. Most of the visitors has left for Hall. Some of them to be in places in Parliament. It is rather strange that she should have come here in the first place."
Hi everyone, welcome to the stream. Hi. Yeah, I'm reading a story today, so if that's what you want to hear, so just stay tuned. Stella colored, and a feeling of vague irritation took possession of her. Why? She scarcely knew.
"I should think that everyone should be glad to come to Winwood Hall at any time. Even Lady Lenore,"
she said in a low voice. He nodded.
"Winwood Hall is a fine place,"
he said, slowly.
"But Lady Lenore is accustomed to palaces. There's not a ballroom in London where her absence will not be noticed. It is strange, perhaps. And perhaps Lady Winwood has some motive."
Hey, thank you so much for the rose. Thank you so much for the rose, yeah? I mean it. Let me continue. Okay.
"Some motive?"
repeated Stella, turning her eyes toward him.
"What motive can she possibly have?"
"There is Leicester," he said.
"Leicester?"
The word was out of her lips before she was aware of it, and a vivid crimson dyed her face.
"Lord Leicester, I mean."
"Yes," he answered.
"Nothing would please his mother more than to see him marry, and he could not marry a more suitable person than Lenore." "Yes, that must be it, of course. Well, he could not do better, and as for her, she has refused greater chances. There is charm in being the future Countess of Winwood, which is not to be despised. I wonder where he would fall into trap, if trap it is intended to be."
Stella sat silent, her head thrown back, her eyes fixed on the stars. He saw she was very pale, and there was a strange, intent look in her eyes. There was also a dull aching in her heart, which is scarcely distinct enough for pain. It annoyed her, and it shamed her. What could it matter to her? To her, Stella Etheridge, the niece of a poor painter, whom Lord Leicester, future Earl of Winwood, married. Nothing. Actually, even less than nothing. But still, the dull aching drove in her heart, and his face floated between her and the stars. His voice rang in her ears. How fortunate How blessed some women are. Here, for instance, was the girl of 23, beautiful and famously beautiful, noble and reigning like the queen of the great world. And yet the gods were not satisfied, but they must give her Leicester windward, for of course it was impossible that he should resist if she chose to put her forth her charm. Had not her uncle said she could fascinate, had not evidently fascinated him. The dreamer, the artist, the man who had seen and knew the world so well. For a moment she gave herself this reflection and this dull aching, and the gesture of impatience she rose, so suddenly as to startle the man.
What's the matter, Stella?
He asked.
Nothing. Shall we have lights? The room is so dark and still and...
Her voice broke. She went to the mantel shelf and lit a candle, and she did so as she looked up and saw her face reflected in the antique mirror, and started. Was that her face? That pale, half-startled visage looking at her so sadly. With a laugh she put down the dark hair from her brow, and gliding to the organ began to play, feverishly, restlessly at first, but presently the music worked its charm and soothed her savage feelings. Yes, she was savage. She knew it. She felt it. This woman had everything, while she... And suddenly the door opened, and a stream of light broke into the lamp carried by Mrs. Panfield. "Are you there, Miss Stella?" "Oh yes, there you are. I thought it was Mr. Etheridge playing. You don't often play like that. There's a note for you." "A note? For me?" exclaimed Stella, turning on her stool with amazement. Mrs. Panfield smiled and nodded. "Yes, miss. There's an answer, please." Stella took the note and hesitantly, as if she was expecting it to contain a charge of explosive dynamite. The envelope was enveloped in a thin, beautiful hand to Miss Stella Etheridge. Stella turned the envelope over and started as she saw the arms stamped upon it. She knew it. It was a windward crest. For a moment she sat down, looking at it without offering to open it, and with an effort she tore it open, slowly, and read the note enclosed. "Dear Miss Etheridge," oh sorry, wrong character. "Dear Miss Etheridge, will you redeem the promise you made me this afternoon and come and see me? Will you ask Mr. Etheridge to bring you to dine with them tomorrow at 8 o'clock? I say them because I dine always alone, but perhaps you will not mind coming to me after dinner for a little while. Do not let Mr. Etheridge refuse, as he generally does, but tell him to bring you for my sake. Yours very truly, Lillian Winward." Hi everyone, hi in the chat, welcome. Stella read and reread it as if she could not believe her senses. Lady Lillian has invited, and the invitation had sounded so vague that she had scarcely remembered it. And now was a direct invitation to Winwood Hall, and to dinner. "Well, miss," said Mr. Panfield, Mrs. Penfold. Stella started. I will give you the answer directly, she said. Then she went across to her uncle and stood beside him, the letter in her hand. He was lost in thought and quite unsuspicious of the thunderclap preparing for him.
Uncle, I have just got a letter. Ah, from where, Stella? From Lady Lillian.
He looked up quickly.
She has asked me to dinner tomorrow. No, he said.
She put the letter in his hand.
Read it, will you, my dear?
He said. And she read it, conscious that her voice trembled.
Well?
He said.
Well?
She repeated with a smile. He put his hand to his brow.
To dinner? Tomorrow? Oh dear me. Well, you would like to go?
And he looked up at her.
Of course. What am I saying? Of course you would like to go.
She looked down. Her face was delicately flushed, her eyes shining.
Of course. Well, say yes. It is very kind. You see, Stella, your wish is gratified almost as soon as you utter it. You will see your paragon, Lady Lenore.
She started, and her face went pale. I've changed my mind, she said, in a low voice.
I find I don't want to see her so badly as I thought. I think I don't care to go, Uncle.
He stared at her. She was still an enigma to him.
Nonsense, child. Not care to see Winwood Hall. Besides, it is Lady Lillian. We must go, Stella.
She stood still with the letter in hand.
But, Uncle, I have nothing to wear. Nothing to wear?
And he looked up at her, up and down.
I have nothing fitting for Winwood Hall, she said. Uncle, I don't think I can go.
He laughed, gently.
You will find something to wear between now and 7:30 tomorrow, or my faith in Mrs. Penfold's resources will be shaken. Accept, my dear.
She went slowly to the table. 2 lines only was written by her. Hi, ni hao. Hi, Honey Star. Thank you so much for the like. Dear Lady Lillian, we shall be very glad indeed to come and see you tomorrow. Yours very truly, Stella Etheridge. Then she rang the bell and gave a note to Mrs. Penfold. I'm going to Winwood Hall tomorrow, she said with a smile, and I've got nothing to wear, Mrs. Penfold. And then she laughed. Mrs. Penfold threw up her hands after the manner of her kind. To the hall, Miss Stella? Tomorrow? Oh dear, what shall we do? And then she glanced at the armchair and beckoned Stella out of the room. Come upstairs and let's see what we can manage. To the hall. Think of that. And she threw up her head so proudly. Stella sat on a chair, looking on with a smile. With the scanty wardrobe was overhauled, scanty as it was. It contained everything that was needful for such use as Stella might ordinarily require. But a dinner at the hall was quite out of the ordinary. At last, After holding up dress to dress and dropping it with a shake of her head, Mrs. Panfold took up a cream sateen.
"That's very pretty," said Stella. "But it's only sateen,"
exclaimed Mrs. Panfold.
"It looks like satin a little, by the candlelight at least. And they have real satin and silk and velvet,"
deplored Mrs. Panfold eagerly.
"Nobody will notice me,"
said Stella consolingly.
"It doesn't matter."
Mrs. Panfold glanced at her with a curious smile.
"Will they not, Miss Stella? I don't know. I think they will. But it must be this dress or nothing, or nothing. You can't go in a cotton, or the black merino, or the other dress you wore the other night."
Your voice sounds like Granger from Mobile Legend. Really, I haven't really heard his voice, but if you say so, I'll check out his voice later. The lace? Oh, sorry, wrong person.
"The lace,"
said Mrs. Panfold thoughtfully, and then her face brightened.
Wait a moment,"
she said as she dropped the dress and hurried from the room, returning in a few moments with a small box.
"Speaking of lace, just reminded me, Stella, that I had some by me. It was made by my mother. I don't know whether it's good enough for you."
And as she spoke, she opened the box and lifted some lace from her interior.
"Good!" exclaimed Stella. "It's beautiful, delicious, and heavenly. Will you be kind to lend it to me?" "No, but I'll give it to you if you will take it, Miss Stella,"
said the good woman with a proud smile.
No, not for worlds, but I'll wear it if you let me,"
said Stella. And she took a long strip and put it round her throat.
"Oh, it is beautiful, beautiful. It would indeed make the poorest dress look handsome. I will take great care of it, indeed I will." "What nonsense, dear Miss Stella. How glad am I at the thought of it. And it does look pretty now that you wear it."
And she looked at the beautiful face admiringly.
"And you want gloves? Let me see. Yes, you got some cream gloves. You'll go with the dress, won't they? And now, you go downstairs, and I'll look the things and tack the lace on. Going to the hall? I'm so glad, Miss Stella." "Are you?"
said Stella softly as she went downstairs.
"I don't know whether I'm glad or sorry."
Okay, so that is chapter 9 of this story. So it seems that Stella's going to be going for dinner with Lady Lillian, right? Give me 2 minutes while I take a quick break. So, for those of you who are watching, I don't know, what do you think of the story so far? Pardon me, today I am having a bit of a sore throat, but I'm still trying to voice the characters. It's been a rough 2 days for me, actually. Okay, so, chapter 10. Okay, one moment. Give me a quick moment. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, my mic was about to fall. Okay. The great clock in the hall stables chimed the half hour 7:30, and the sound came floating. Oh my god. And the sound came floating down the valley. Oh my god. Lucille, thank you so much for the roses. You didn't need to. Thank you so much, really. Well, I hope you've had a splendid evening. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay. Where am I from? I'm from Malaysia. Okay, I'll get back to the story. Mr. Atteridge stood at the door clad in the evening dress, which old-fashioned and well-worn as it was, sat upon him with a gracious air, and made him look even more distinguished than ever. The fly was waiting at the door, and he glanced at his watch, and took towards the stairs, when a light appeared above, and a light step sounded over his head. The next moment, a vision, as it seemed to him, floated into sight and came down upon him. Stella was in a cream satin dress. The exquisite lace was clinging round her slender and graceful throat. There was a red rose in her hair, but it was not the dress, nor the lace, nor the rose even, which chained the painter's eyes. It was from the lovely, girlish face. Hey guys, you like my voice? Thank you so much. Thank you for the like. Where was I? The excitement had brought a dash of warm color in the clear olive cheeks and a bright light into the dark eyes. The lips were half apart with a smile, and the whole face was eloquent of youth's fresh tide of life and spirits. If they had all Havel and James Stark to choose from, they would have not chosen a more suitable dress, a more becoming color. The whole made a fitting frame for the girlish beauty. You guys, thank you so much. Yeah, Lucille, thank you. Ree and lovely cat. Lovely to have all of you here. Okay, so let me continue with my story. It's easier for me to talk, and this is my normal voice. It's easier for me to talk with this voice, but when I'm voice acting, I use a more higher pitched voice to emphasize on the characters. So pardon me. You randomly scrolled, yeah? That's fine. That's fine. Well, I hope your day is great. No regrets. Well, I sure hope so. Well, you can stay here and hang out, but if you have something else to do, then have a good night. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Well, uncle, she said, with a little blush. What have you done to yourself, my child? He said, with a simple, open-eyed wonder. Isn't she just beautiful? Murmured Mrs. Panfold, in an ecstasy. But then, if it had been a morning cotton, it would have all been the same. And she proceeded to wrap her woolen shawl around her, so carefully, as if she was something that might be destroyed at too hard of a touch. Oh my god, Lucille, thank you so much. Lucille, that's enough. That's a bit. You need to keep some for Silas. All right. So thank you so much for the 31 roses. Hey Ree. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying the other characters. I need to differentiate the voices so that you know which character is who. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Lucille, you didn't have to. Yes, we mentioned Silas. Okay. Love you so much, Lucille. Thank you so much for that. Yes, and we were talking about Silas. Of course, we are fans of Love and Deep Space here, of course. Okay, so let me continue. Mind she has this wound round up like her when she comes out, sir, and be sure to keep the window up. And don't let the air breathe on me, or I shall melt, uncle, laughed Stella. Upon my word, I'm half disposed to think so, he muttered. And then they entered the fly, Mrs. Penfold disposing the short train of the despised satin with gingerly care, and started. You don't have enough memory to play Love in Deep Space. That's fine. I mean, I completely get you. Yes, again, thank you so much, Lucille. It means a lot to me, definitely. Okay. Where was I going with this? This dialogue is going to be a bit of a killer. There's a lot of female voices. This is going to be tough. Okay, so let me continue. How have you managed it all? Asked the old man, quite bewildered. I feel quite strange conveying to a brilliant young lady. And I feel frightened out of my life, said Stella, with a little breath and laugh. Then you can't conceal your alarm with infinite art, he retorted. Very focused, I love you. Okay, take care, Ree. Take care of yourself. Thank you for coming by. Where am I from? I'm from Malaysia. Okay. Where was I? That's just it. Okay. That's just it, she assented. My heart is beating like a steam hammer, but like an Indian at a stake. I'm determined to smile to the end. They will be very terrible, uncle, will they not? Yes, guys, why are you guys so surprised I'm from Malaysia? If I have the point where I'm from a city, so maybe around Kuala Lumpur or Selangor. Yeah. But I'm quite affiliated with Sabah and Sarawak, so without disclosing any more details, I'm just basically based in KL. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Who? He asked. The Countess and the Paragon. I mean Lady Lenore Beauchamp. I shall have to be careful. Iya ke saya Cina? Betul ke? Okay, never mind. Where was I? Smile and pass it like by a gracious air, he said, laughing. You're a clever and bold girl, Stella, but even you cannot take a rise, as we used to say in my school days, out of Lady Lenore. I'm not clever, and I'm trembling like a mouse, said Stella with a piteous little pout. You'll stand by me, uncle, won't you? He laughed. I think you're quite able to defend yourself, my dear. Never knew one of you who was not. Okay. The fly rumbled over the bridge and entered the long avenue, and Stella, looking out, saw the lights of a house shining at the end of a vista.
What a grand place it is,
she murmured, almost to herself.
Uncle. I feel as if I was about to enter another world. And I am, I think. I've never seen a countess in my life. Have been shut within the four walls of a school. If she says one word to me, I shall expire.
Okay, I think she's being very overly dramatic. He laughed and began to feel for the sketch he had brought with him.
You will find her not very terrible,
he said. The fly got to the end of the avenue at last and wound round the broad drive to the front entrance. It loomed so large and awe-inspiring above them that Stella's heart seemed to sink, but her color came again as two tall footmen in grand but not gorgeous livery came down the broad steps and opened the fly door. She would not let them see that she was just afraid. Afraid. Yes, that was the word she was looking for to describe her feelings as she was ushered into the hall. She looked round at its pure vastness. There were several other footmen standing about with solemn faces, and a maid dressed in black with a spotless cap came forward with what seemed to Stella in stately steps and asked her in a most reverential whisper whether she would come up upstairs. But Stella shook her head and was about to unwind the shawl when the maid, with a quick but respectful movement, undertook the task, going through it with the greatest care and attention. Then her uncle held his arm and she put her hand upon it, and in another instant, as if they had been waiting and watching, though their eyes had been fixed onto the ground, two footmen drew aside the curtains, shutting off the corridor to the drawing room, and another footman paced slowly and with the head erect before them. It was all solemn. The dim yet sufficient light, the towering hall with its flags and mirrors and armor, the endless curtains, and the gold fringe. That Stella was reminded of some Gothic cathedral. The wind-gleaming statues seemed to look down at her as she passed between them, with a frown of astonishment at her audacity in entering their solemn presence. The very silence seemed to reapproach her light footsteps on the thick, carpeted mosaic floor. She began to be overpowered, but suddenly she remembered that she too was of ancient birth, that she was an Utteridge, that the man whose arm she was leaning upon was an artist, and a great one, and she held her head erect and called to the color of her face. It was not a moment too soon, for another pair of curtains were drawn aside, and in the next instant she stood on the threshold of the drawing room, and she heard a low but distinct voice that says,
Mr. and Miss Atteridge."
She had not time to look around. She saw in a flash the exquisite room with its shaded candles and the softly gleaming mirrors. She saw several tall, black-coated, white-chested forms of gentlemen and richly dressed ladies, and she was conscious that a tall, beautiful, and stately lady was gliding across the room toward them, and knew it was the Countess. Lady Winwood had heard the announcement, and had risen from where she was sitting with the Countess of Longford to welcome the guests. The painter was a favorite of hers, and if she could have had a will, he would have been a frequent visitor at the hall. When Lillian had told her of a meeting with Mr. Atteridge's niece and asked permission to invite her, she had assented at once, expecting to see some well-subdued middle-aged woman. Why she should have this pictured her so subtly, she could have not told. Perhaps Mr. Atteridge was old and so subdued himself. She had scarcely listened to Lillian's descriptions, and Leicester had said no word. But now, as she came forward and saw a young and beautiful lady, graceful and self-possessed, and dressed with perfect taste, looking as distinguished as if she had gone through a couple of London seasons, when the vision of Stella, in all her fresh young loveliness, broke upon her suddenly and unexpectedly. An infinite surprise took possession of her, and for a moment she half paused, but it was only for a moment, and by no change in her face, however slight, was her surprise revealed. "How do you do, Mr. Atteridge? It was so kind of you to come. I know how great an honor this is, and I am grateful." This is what Stella heard in the softest and most dulce of voices. Kind, grateful. This was how a countess welcomed a poor painter. A glow of light seemed to illuminate in Stella's mind. She had expected to see a tall, stately woman dressed in satin and diamonds, and with a coldly severe manner, and instead, here was a lady with a small and gentle voice, and a face all softness and kindness. In an instant, she had learned her first lesson, that a mark of high rank and breeding is pure gentleness and humility. The queen sits beside the bed of a sick peasant. The peer thanks the waiters who had handed him his umbrella. Hi Tears, welcome to the chat. Okay, one moment. Okay. Where was I? Stella took her gloved hand. Her courage came instantly, and she raised her eyes to the beautiful and serene face, little guessing that she did so. That countess was filled with surprise and admiration as the dark orbs raised. "We are quite a small party," said the countess. "Nearly all our friends have left us. We should be in town before this, but Lord Winwood is detained by business." As she spoke, the Earl approached them, and Stella saw a tall and thin, noble-looking man bending before her as if he was expecting a touch of her hand. "How do you do, Mr. Atterridge? We have managed to entice you from your hermitage at last. How do you do, Miss Atterridge? I hope you didn't feel the cold driving." Stella smiled, and she knew why every approach was screened by curtains. The Earl drew the painter aside, and the Countess, just laying her fingers on Stella's arm, guided her to the old Countess of Longford. Mr. Atteridge's niece," she said. "This is Lady Longford." Stella was conscious of a pair of keen grey eyes fixed on her face. "Glad to know you, my dear," said the old lady. "Come and sit beside me and tell me about your uncle. He's a wonderful man, but a very wicked one." "Wicked?" said Stella. "Yes, wicked," repeated the old lady, with a smile on her wrinkled face. "All obstinate people are wicked, and he's obstinate because he persists in hiding himself away instead of coming into the world and consenting to be famous, as he should." Stella's heart was warmed directly. "But perhaps now you have come." Oh, sorry, that was a character. But perhaps now that you have come, you will persuade him to leave his shell." "Do you mean the cottage? I don't think anything would persuade him to leave that. Why should he? He's quite happy there." The Countess looked at her. "That's a sensible retort," she said. "Why should he? Why should he? I don't know what to answer, but I do owe him a grudge. Do you know he has persistently refused to come and see me, though I had almost gone to knees to him." Stella smiled. "He do not care to go anywhere," she said. "If he went anywhere, I'm sure he would come to you." The old Countess glanced at her approvingly. "That was nicely said," she murmured. "How old are you?" 19, said Stella. "Then you have inherited your uncle's brains," the old lady replied curtly. "It is not given to every girl to say the right thing at 19. Stella blushed and looked round the room. There were 10 or 12 people standing and sitting about. Some of them were beautiful women, exquisitely dressed, talking to some gentlemen, but Lord Leicester was not amongst the latter. She was conscious of that. Okay, 1 second, guys. She was conscious of that, although she scarcely knew what she was looking for him. She wondered which was Lady Lenore. There was a tall, fair lady leaning against the piano. But somehow Stella did not think... Oh, I'm sorry about that. My phone, I should have muted it. 1 moment. Okay. There was a tall, fair lady leaning against the piano, but somehow Stella did not think it was the famous beauty. The clock on the bracket struck 8, and she saw the Earl took out his watch and glanced at it mechanically. And so he did so, a voice behind her. "Dinner is served, my lady." Right, where was I? Nobody took... Oh, hi, hello there. Nobody took any notice, however, and the Countess did not show by sign or look that she heard. And suddenly, the curtains at the other end of the room were swung apart, and a tall form entered. Though her eyes were fixed on another part of the room, she knew who it was. and for a moment she would not look away. And then she directed her eyes slowly, and she saw that her instinct has not misled her. It was Leicester. For a moment she was conscious of a feeling of surprise, though she knew him well. But in that instant he looked so different that he seemed almost a stranger. She had not seen him before in evening dress, and the change from the velvet coat and the knickerbockers to the severe but aristocratic black suit that struck her. Like all well-made and high-bred men, he looked at her the best in the dress which fashion has decreed shall be the evening costume for gentlemen. She had thought him handsome, noble. In this easy and careless suit of velvet, she knew he was distinguished looking in his suit for evening sables. And with his hand upon the curtain, he stood, his head erect, his eyes not eagerly, but commandingly scanning the room. She could not tell why or how she knew, but she knew he was looking for her. Presently, he sees her, and a subtle change came over his face. It was not a smile so much as if a look of satisfaction, and she knew again that a frown would have been settled on his white brow if she whom he sought had not been there. With a high but firm step, he came across the room and stood before her, holding out his hand. "You have come," he said. "I thought you would not have made it. It is very kind of you, Mr. Atteridge." She gave him her hand without another word. She knew that the keen grey eyes of the old lady beside her were fixed on her face. He seemed to remember too, for in a quieter, more commonplace tone he added, I'm late. It is an habitual fault of mine." "It is," he whispered. He turned his smile upon her. "Are you going to scold me?" "I'm not fond of wasting my time," she said. "Come and sit down for a minute if you can." He glanced at the clock. "Am I not keeping you waiting?" he said. Lady Longford shook her head. "No." "We are waiting for Lenore." "Then she's not here," thought Stella. Lenore," he said, with a smile. "Well, no one will dare to scold her." "Hi everyone, hi guys, hi. As he spoke with the curtains parted, and someone entered. Framed by the curtain that fell between, in the crimson folds stood a girl. Not yet a woman, for all her 23 years, a wonderful beauty, with deep golden hair and violet eyes. Stella knew at once from her uncle's description, but it was not the beauty that surprised her and made her start, it was something much more. It was the nameless, indescribable charm which surrounded her. It was the grace which distinguished her figure, her very attitude. She stood for a moment, with a faint and half smile upon her lips, looking around. Then she glided with a peculiar movement that struck Stella as grace itself. To Lady Winwood and bent her head down to the Countess. Stella Winwood could not hear what she said, but she knew she was apologizing her tardiness by the way the Earl, who was standing by, smiled at her. Yes, evidently, Lady Lenore would not be scolded for keeping dinner waiting. Oh, God. Hi guys, welcome. I'm reading a story today. Ah, that's better. Okay. Where was I? She saw the beautiful lips move, saw the Earl make an answer, and then watched them move together across the room. Whither were they going? To her surprise, they came toward her and stopped in front of her. Miss Atteridge, said the Earl in his low and subdued voice. Let me introduce you, Lady Lenore Beauchamp. Stella looked upon and met the violet eyes fixed onto her. For a moment she was speechless. The eyes, so serene and full, were commanding, and seemed to seek out her own soul and read every thought it held. To read it so closely and clearly that her own eyes dropped, and then, with an effort, she held out her own hand, and as the great beauties closed softly over it, as she raised her lids again. And so they stood looking at each other, and Lord Leicester stood beside her, with a characteristic smile on his face. Okay. So that is going to be chapter 10. Oh my god, I'm a little... Okay.